because whoever has it has power. And so the hero can get the MacGuffin back, and then the villain takes it back again. And I mean, they can exchange this. They can lose it. They can all go searching for it.
This episode is brought to you by Bulletproof Script Coverage, where screenwriters go to get their scripts read by top Hollywood professionals. Learn more at covermyscreenplay.com. I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, Robert McKee. How are you doing, Robert?
I'm great, Alex. And you?
I'm doing very good. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. Our last conversation, as you might have known, it did very well. People love you and love the way you approach story and dialogue and character. Now, in this episode, we're going to talk about your new book, Action, which when you guys reached out to me, I was like, oh my God, he's got another book. He's going crazy. He's just releasing books left and right. I remember Story was like for a long time the only book, and then now you're popping them out left and right.
My method is to I teach something before I write about it. Mm-hmm. And I do that because I want to hear the questions, and then I have to find the answers. And so when I taught enough about dialogue, I wrote a book. Of course, I've been teaching about character for decades. I wrote a book, and now Action. I've been doing seminars and webinars on Action for some time. So yeah, and now and in fact, as we speak, I am busily writing Story 2.
Oh,
I'm at chapter 3. And so it's been 25 years since I wrote Story, and I learned a lot in those 25 years. And so I'm going to do a whole new version of Story, and going to come at it from a very different perspective and approach. Not the same fundamentals, but so anyway, I keep writing. I don't know what else to do.
might as well just keep going, my friend. Well, you're doing a service for screenwriters and storytellers around the world with your work, and that's why I love to highlight what you're doing here on the show. So my very first question is, what is principal versus presentational genres in Action?
It's good. One is content, and the other is form.
Okay.
So the principal genres give you content. And so you have action. The content is life and death. And then you have love stories, for example. The content, the value there, of course, is love, hate. You have family dramas, domestic dramas. There, the content is unity versus breakup. And on it goes. So you have these principal genres, crime, where the content, justice, injustice. And so you have these principal genres, and there's about 10 or so of them that I list. And they give you the value at the heart of the story. They give you the principal characters. They give you the principal emotion you're trying to express and cause people to feel. And they give you the core scene, but the essential turning point of the whole story. And so now that is content. But now you have to express it. And so now you have to present that story. And so you could tell it realistically, that's a presentation, or you can tell it as a fantasy. You could put it in the contemporary setting, or you could put it in a futuristic setting, or in history. You could sing and dance it as a musical, and on it goes. And so you have all these various styles of presentation, and there's a dozen or so of those. And so a principal genre, these are the rock, this is the core of storytelling. These are the great forms, the the modern epic, the ancient epic, and so forth. These are the thousands of years old content of what we tell stories about. And of course, there are great principal genres that are about human change. And so there are stories about the changing morality of a character as they move from immoral to moral and redeem themselves, or they move from moral to immoral and damn themselves. You have stories of characters evolving as human beings in a positive way, becoming more complete realizations of their human potential. Or you have stories where people just with drugs or whatever destroy their humanity. And so you have a half a dozen of these primary genres about character change, and then another 10 or 12 genres about changing the outer circumstances of a character's life, as we do in crime stories and love stories and so forth. Those are the foundations. And action is one of those. Action is a principal primary genre, and there's lots of ways to do action. You can do it as a fantasy, you can do it in sci-fi, you can do it in realistically, whatever, in history, etc. All of those presentations are at your disposal as an action writer. So you got a lot of choices.
A lot of choices.
And all of those primary genres, those principal genres, can be merged.
Yeah, like something like Braveheart has a lot of those genres inside of that. It's a romance, it's a love story, it's action, it's a revenge film. There's so many things in Braveheart.
It's frequently done, of course, to merge a love story with an action story, where the love interest sort of gets in the way, causes the protagonist to have to make choices it never would have had to make otherwise. And crime, of course, crime and action get merged a lot. Thrillers and action get merged a lot. And so you have all those principal genres, and they can be mixed and merged. Mixed meaning you cut back and forth between the genre. Merged means that the two cause one another. And so the reason for the thriller causes you to get into action. And so that, the variety then is infinite.
It's endless, without question.
Endless, of course.
Now you talk about the four core elements of action. Can you discuss a little bit about those core elements?
Yeah, it's the same. All those principal genres have four cores. You have a core cast. What is the essential cast, the minimal essential cast? So in a love story, you've got two people. You've got lovers, right? In a family story, you've got, usually husband, wife, and kids, right? In an action story, you've got a hero, a villain, and a victim. And those three are essential. If you eliminate the victim, there's no point in the hero and villain fighting it out. Nothing's at stake. If you eliminate the hero, then it's a thriller because the victim has to survive, and they're not heroic. And so you have those three core characters. Then you have a core value, and in action, it's life and death. Justice, injustice is the value in a crime story. But justice, injustice is irrelevant in action. The core value of action is life and death. whether or not laws are broken or kept, doesn't matter. So you have a core value. You have a core event. And the core event in action, the most difficult scene by far to write, is the hero at the mercy of the villain.
Mhm.
Weaponless, defenseless, back to the wall, totally at the mercy of the overpowering villain, and from a position of complete helplessness at the mercy of the villain. Somehow, the action hero has to find the resources to turn the tables on the villain, and in that scene, come out on top. Go from at the mercy to on top. And that'll break your back trying to figure that, create that scene. So you have core values, a core value, core characters, core event, and a core emotion. What do you want people to feel when you're writing in any of those principal genres? And in action, the emotion you want them to feel is excitement. A thriller is full of tension, right? Because thrillers are all about darkness, all about figuring out who can you trust, what's really going on here, what do they want, what do they got? I mean, there's all these questions, and you're lost in the labyrinth of a thriller. But in action, no, it's there. It's happening right in front of you. And so what you're trying to get people to feel is excitement. That's why I put it in the subtitle of the book. It's called Action, the Art of Excitement. And you're trying to create that. And that's a wonderful experience. Go to a movie and really feel the excitement of the action, and not boredom, not mystery, but excitement. So those are the four cores, and each of the principal genres that I list in the first chapter of the book, in order to orient the reader to the action. Each of those genres has those four cores. You all have core cast, core emotion, core event, so forth.
And when you were talking, I was thinking of this, the scene in Terminator 2, which illustrates everything that you're talking about,
Yes.
where you got Arnold fighting obviously a much more superior villain, which is a T-1000, and to the point where he's helpless against them. Literally, he gets stabbed. Spoiler alert: gets stabbed with a giant metal rod, and he's stuck there, and everyone thinks he's dead.
Yes.
And then he has to come back and save the victims, which is Linda Hamilton and John Connor.
Yeah.
So Sarah Connor and John Connor. So it's in that ultimate. And as I'm talking about it, I'm starting to get chills because it's playing in my head. That's how good James Cameron is when he writes.
That's how good. And that was that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And those Terminator films are wonderful. And if that core event, the hero at the mercy of the villain, I'll tell you this, the action, of course, is one of the reasons I wrote this book, because I teach other genres, comedy, love stories, and so forth. Is action is in the greatest demand, not just in films, but in games, right? Maybe even more in games than who knows? And of course, in long form television and novels, the action genre is because of the tremendous pressures in society today, to get into an action story is a great pleasure. So action, huh?
No. So like I was saying that if you look at the top 10, even the top 20 biggest blockbusters of all time, even the animated ones have action in it.
Mhm.
They all have action. And then a perfect example is the latest, the Messiah that is Tom Cruise, with 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 Top Gun Maverick.
Top Gun. Yeah.
I mean that movie. Did you get a chance to watch Top Gun?
Oh yeah, sure.
I mean, it is. I was on the edge of my seat. I was bawling. I was crying. I was excited. I mean,
Really? Yeah,
that's
yeah.
literally the
It was,
definition of excitement.
yeah, it was great. It was just great.
It,
And those sequences, those fighter sequences, I mean, it's just fantastic stuff.
without
Uh,
without question.
so you know, if somebody wants to find success in Hollywood today, writing action is the widest open door there is. But it's also an ass kicker.
Why is that?
It's so hard for two reasons. One, it's been done to death.
Yep.
And the writer has to win the war on cliches.
Can you dive into that a little bit? Because a lot of people don't understand that. I'd love you just to talk a little bit about cliche.
Uh, a cliche is a great idea that someone had 100 years ago, literally. Okay, great idea. I mean, one of the first movies of all time, in 1903, was a chase across the desert, stagecoach, whatever, right? And it was a great idea. People loved it. And because it's the original was such a wonderful idea, it has been copied and copied and repeated and done and done and done and done for decades until everybody has seen it so many times that even though originally it was a great idea, it's now the most predictable and boring choice. That's a cliche. And action, because we have told action stories before the movies. I mean,
The Iliad. The Iliad.
Yeah, exactly. The Iliad.
Honestly.
It's one big, long, action piece, right?
Mhm.
And so, because we've been telling action stories for literally thousands of years, all of these great ideas have been collected into what we call cliches, and we know them all. We've seen them too many times, and therefore they are instantaneously boring to people.
Mhm.
Because they sit there thinking, I've seen all this before. So, despite decades, if not centuries, of a certain genre, the contemporary writer has to go to battle against these cliches. They've got to do what the genre requires. They've got to create a villain, but not the kind we've ever seen before. They've got to create a hero, but not the kind we've ever seen before. They have to create a victim, but not the kind we've ever seen before. Got to put that victim in jeopardy, but not the way we've ever seen it before. We got to arouse that hero to action, but not the way we've ever seen it before. And all of the strategies and tactics of action have to be worked with, but in fresh, fascinating ways. And the most difficult of all is the hero at the mercy of the villain.
Mm.
How are you going to turn the tables from a position of helplessness that we've never seen before? And if somebody can take on action, write a screenplay, write a novel, or a game, and bring it to the point of hero at the mercy of the villain, and have that hero turn tables on the villain in a way that is true to the characters, true to the setting, but unlike anything we've ever seen quite that way before. You will, the novel will sell, your script will be bought, your game will be played. I mean, because that, for those of us who love action, that is what we are living for. To build that story to that great moment and have it happen in a way that we didn't see coming, but when it happens, it makes beautiful sense. Surprise with a rush of insight. So I wrote Action to give writers the understanding of the genre that they need in depth, so that if they tackle it, they don't just leave elements out by mistake. They know what the genre requires, and I give them tons of examples so they see how it's been done wonderfully and sometimes badly in the past. And then I give them a push and say, go do it.
Go with God. Let's see what you can do. Yeah. So there's two things that, as you were talking, came to mind. One movie that turned cliche on its head while poking fun at cliche was Scream, which is an action horror and a thriller in a way. And it was brilliantly done. But the definition of cliche of a more modern time is a film like Die Hard. When Die Hard came out, there had never been a terrorist takeover, or if they had, it was not like Die Hard. And then now Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard in a stadium, Die Hard. Sure. It's everywhere now. So now it's a constant cliche, and we're like,
it became a cliche because Die Hard 1 was superbly original. It captured all of the great structure of the nature of the genre. It executed everything, but in a way you didn't see coming. You didn't care. You were all caught up in the story. And the mercy scene, beautiful, is the greatest mercy. One of certainly the greatest mercy scenes in action. And so, so then it gets repeated, and it becomes a cliche.
Right, very much like what 48 Hours did and Lethal Weapon did, which was the buddy cop movie.
Yeah,
with Jesus. I mean, how many buddy cop movies have we seen since those movies came out?
Well, it's easy to see why, because I mean, writers are under a tremendous pressure to create something that people want to see. The investors are under tremendous pressure to make sure that their investment makes a profit. And so when you can go into a producer's office and say, it's Die Hard on a runaway train or whatever it is. Well, we've had runaway trains. We all know Die Hard, etc. Okay, and you put it in certain boxes for them, then they know what you're trying to do.
Right.
So then they read the screenplay to see if you did it in a fresh way, if you turn the cliches upside down, if you did it with enough originality, then people aren't going to sit there going, "Oh, it's Die Hard on a train. I've seen this all before." I mean, winning the war on cliches is a hell of a thing because we are so prolific in our storytelling. I mean, when you think about it, people today, between going to the movies, watching TV at night, reading novels if they do, playing games if they do, spend almost as much time inside of fiction as they do inside of reality. In the 19th century, for example, how much time did the average middle-class person spend in fiction per week? Well, if they were a reader, they might read only what, an hour a day.
Hour to a day if they're like, yeah.
Yeah, let's say that's a lot, but let's
Mhm.
say it's an hour a day. And if they lived in a city of enough size, there was a theater where they could go to the theater once a month. That's in 2 hours. And so, in a month's time, they might spend all together, if they really have 30 hours in fiction. People do that now every week.
Mm-hmm.
And so the amount of time people spend in fiction has quadrupled, maybe tenfold. Uh, and so, uh, and so with all of that storytelling, all of these elements get repeated and they become cliches.
You know what's
And,
funny? I have my daughters. I have young daughters, and I watch them watch television with me sometimes, and it's so fascinating that they're so young, but yet they're able to like, oh, that's the real bad guy over there, or that's like, and they're calling it, and I'm like, how are they? They're so
and they're calling it, right? Yeah, yeah.
and they're calling it almost all the time perfectly right. They're going, that's not the no, it's the other guy. He's the real bad guy. And it's
Right.
and then you and I could probably look at that movie and go, yeah, it's obvious it's going to be this guy. I mean, we've seen it a million times, but they're like young. They're very young and they're
Yeah.
calling it. So can you imagine when they're 20, 30 years old, how much content and story they've gone through? Much more than I did. Definitely much more than you did over,
Yeah.
as we grew up. So it's so much more difficult for the writer to surprise. That's why when something that does come out that is new and fresh, people lose their minds and they're like, oh, I
That's
gotta
right.
see that.
That's right. And that's why, because it's so difficult, people resort to spectacle.
which is and I want to ask you something about spectacle, because I think there's a lot of spectacle in Hollywood right now. Do you believe that the success of like the Marvel films, which are obviously taken over the theatrical experience pretty much, if you take Marvel take
Yeah.
Marvel, Star Wars, and Harry Potter out of the theaters for the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, you wouldn't have a theatrical business.
No, you
So
wouldn't.
is it because we've seen spectacle before and there's been bad spectacle? I mean, really, a movie like Battleship, I remember
Yeah.
years ago, that was all spectacle, or Transformers 72,
Yeah.
which is all spectacle. And people are like,
Yeah.
I've seen a transforming robot before. I need more. What is it about the Marvel films that is connecting with audiences? Because I don't believe it's just spectacle. There has to be something deeper. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, um, first of all, it is spectacle, but the visual artists who are working on those films have imaginations and the techniques to execute those imaginations that are really superior to anybody else. They have simply gone out. It's like a sports team. They've gone out and got the best players at every position available in the league, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to win every game, 37 to nothing, right? And so it is spectacle in that they just do it better.
Hmm.
Um, and so that there's you see that spectacle on one level does create curiosity. It's not about outcome. How will this turn out? Because we know those stories, right? And your daughters know how it's going to turn out. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's how will they do it in order for it to turn out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the curiosity is about the execution of the action. And if the execution of the action is fresh, original, and really eye-pleasing and stunning to watch, and the music and the sound and all the rest of it, the editing, all goes together. If it creates a spectacle of a quality that you've never seen before. They can do the same old thing, but they do it in a whole new way, or in a way that is more impactful visually than you've ever seen before. So it's still new.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's very successful. It's talent, because it's not as if spectacle has no quality. Of course it does, and it has no importance. Of course it has, right? I mean, Aristotle listed all the 6 elements of the story, and spectacle was the last one, and he said the least important, but it's on the list.
Top Gun without those fighter sequences.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a fun movie, I guess, but
well, you see, in the action genre, you got to take spectacle and elevate it up.
Yeah,
it's not number 6. It's number 6 from Aristotle's point of view in the theater 2,500 years ago, but now, it's I don't know, not number 3 on that list. I mean, you still have events, you still have to tell a great story. In character, you still have to have great characters, but then in action, those events with those characters has to be executed in a fantastically brilliant way, surprising, pleasing. And so in action, spectacle has a lot of value. And so people go to the Marvel films because they know that it will be a visual treat.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they'll do the same thing we've always seen in a whole new way, but they will at least express it in a whole new way. And so it's snobbish to look down your nose at spectacle and say, well, it's just spectacle. But if it's not well done, but that's true of anything. If characters are not well done, they're boring. If it's the same damn turning point we've seen umpteen times, that's boring. And so everything you do has to be well done. And spectacle is just one of those things.
If Jurassic Park would have come out and it wasn't directed by Steven Spielberg and written by Michael Crichton, and it would have just been those dinosaurs with a bad script,
yeah,
it would probably have been somewhat successful because of the spectacle of it. But because of the story, the execution, the people behind it, it turned into the masterpiece that eventually it became.
Right.
So something like Avatar, which is, I think, now still the number 1. I think it bumped back up after the pandemic. Number 1, something like Avatar. Now James is coming out with 4 or 5. I think he says he's going to die on Pandora. This is where he's going. He's not. He's like, I'm going to be 91 doing part 6 of this thing, but I'm dying on this hill, he said. But something like Avatar is, I think, almost as perfect of a combination of character, event, story, and spectacle. Because I remember seeing it 3 times in the theater because of the 3D aspect of it, and this amazing world that they created, the visuals of it, and the story was a very basic, simple story that we've seen before, but it was wrapped in this beautiful
done in a whole new way.
Right, exactly.
The inspiration, the core of Avatar, of course, is that you have a second self. And this doppelganger has adventures.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than a metaphor. It's a photograph of daydreaming.
Right.
Right? It's every kid's life where they dream about having adventures that, obviously sitting in their living room at home, they can't have. And so Avatar made that literal. And so that his second self, his avatar, goes off and has adventures. Matrix was similar in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And And so that, that's a wonderful idea because it tapped into an experience that is so, every kid has that experience. Every kid daydreams about a life that they don't have, and living adventures of one kind or another, whatever. And so the premise of Avatar was inspired, and then the execution was excellent. And then there's this, and this is wonderful in an action story if you can make this work. There's a hidden truth that's always been there for the whole story that you haven't seen, literally, but the moment the truth comes out, you go, oh, of course. And the truth of Avatar was that the planet itself was a living thing.
Of course.
And you go, of course.
Right. Yeah. And I think he's going to
that revelation,
yeah,
of a hidden truth, that makes you, that causes the audience to go back and reconfigure the whole story they've been watching and realize it was always there. It was, in some sense, inevitable that these human beings would just go too far.
Of course.
And when they went over, that planet had a line, okay? And they finally went over the line, okay? And the planet just squashed them like a bug on it, right? And it expresses something we really want to believe, that nature has a greater power, and that we've been pushing nature and prodding nature and spoiling nature and poisoning nature, and sooner or later nature is going to just go and squash us, right? If we don't stop what we're doing in time. And so it's a master metaphor.
Oh, no. Absolutely.
for the destruction of the environment, and it's the environment's revenge. And so that's a truth we all want to believe. And so the writing, I mean, yes, the directing is wonderful and all the rest of it. But these ideas, tapping into the fantasy life and bringing that to life and creating a beautifully told story that has a truth at the heart of it, that nature is going to have the last word, and bringing that into, and putting that into the film is the reason, why people like James Cameron had the great success that they have, is because they know the form, they know how to write, action. But it's about something.
It always is. With Jim's work, it's always about that. I mean, you go back to Terminator, he's saying something. Terminator 2, he's saying something. The Abyss, which was basically a precursor to a lot of the themes of Avatar, right. And Aliens, it's about a mother. It's about two mothers protecting their young. I didn't even realize that till I saw him talking about it in an interview. He goes, I made this entire movie about two mothers protecting their young, because it couldn't just be about aliens and people. I was like, oh my God.
I was in Westwood, in the movie house in Westwood, watching Aliens. And one of the greatest moments of my experience in film, the Act 2 climax, when Ripley says, I'm going back for the kid. The audience almost tore the theater down. I mean, they just went nuts. I did too. We all went nuts. I'm going back for the kid. Oh, God. Right.
So good.
Man.
So good.
That's the mercy scene.
Mm-hmm.
She's at the mercy of that monster, and what's more, the monster has the victim in its clutches,
Mm-hmm.
and from a position of powerlessness, she's going back for the kid to overcome.
Oh,
So,
no.
yeah, we love the genre, and when an action writer gets that right, creates a world that's really we've never seen before, and tells that story and executes those great turning points in ways we've never seen before. It is, as I indicate in the title of my book, it is the essence of excitement.
And still, he wrote one of the greatest sci-fi lines of all time: "Get away from her, you bitch."
Get away from her, you bitch.
One of the best lines ever written in sci-fi.
Yeah, that's right.
Without question.
Yeah.
It's up there with "May the Force be with you." I mean, it's just like it's
No,
one of those.
no, get away from her, you bitch.
It's a little bit better. I'm going to say it's a little bit better.
It's not spiritual.
No. Get away from her,
The
you bitch. Is
Force
definitely
be with
not.
you is spiritual. Get away
Very
from
much
her,
so.
you bitch. It's right down to the ground.
Oh, and everyone was watching that movie is just like, oh, it was just so. As we're talking, I'm still getting like goosebumps. I'm getting like, the blood's flowing talking about it, and that's what a good movie does. When you're explaining the movie to somebody else, and you still get excited about it, you've hit the mark.
Yeah, the form comes to life. The form comes to life inside of you. All the spectacle is a memory, but it's the form. It's the turning point. I'm going back for the kid. Get away from me, you bitch. It's the turning point, the courage of that line, or both of those, whatever. The turning point gets your heart pounding.
Now, in the book, you also talk about the Action McGuffin. Now, I am familiar with the MacGuffin. So what is the Action McGuffin? Or if you can explain the MacGuffin to the audience who might not know what the MacGuffin is, what is an Action McGuffin?
Well, there's MacGuffins in a lot of stories.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a MacGuffin in crime stories often, but certainly in thrillers, in epics. And it's defined as the thing that everybody wants. And when you get it, it gives you power. That's the MacGuffin. It's the thing. It's an actual physical thing that gives you power. So, like in Aliens, it's the kid, right? The kid is the MacGuffin. The monster wants the kid in order to impregnate, so to speak, human beings to reproduce, right? And so it's the thing everybody wants, and when you get it, it gives you power. So it could be the secret to some
nuclear launch codes,
technology.
Yeah.
And in fact, in certain films, Alfred Hitchcock, the people credit Hitchcock with coining the term MacGuffin, but actually he didn't. It was a writer friend of his who coined it, and he repeated it, but because Hitchcock used it, it became famous. Hitchcock came to realize you don't even have to tell him what it is. So in a film like North by Northwest, the MacGuffin is secrets. There's some kind of secret, probably a formula, probably for a weapon, something like that, okay? But there's a secret, and it's encapsulated, and people are chasing after the secret throughout the movie. But Hitchcock never tells you what the secret was for. I mean, what was it? What was in the secret? What were people going to do with the secret? He didn't tell you about it because he realized it doesn't really matter. It's the thing that everybody wants, and when you get it, it gives you power. And everybody is chasing after it. Everybody wants it. Everybody's struggling to get it. And so, from an audience's point of view, you're thinking, well, if all those characters want that thing so badly, it must really be important.
So is that the action sequence, or is that something different?
No,
The action McGuffin. I mean,
no, it's a motivation.
it's just a motivation. So the action motivation, the action would be the same.
The pursuit of the MacGuffin is driving, is driving the characters. They are pursuing the MacGuffin. If the hero can get his hands on the MacGuffin, or her hands on the MacGuffin, then they can use that to defeat the villain. If the villain keeps the MacGuffin, he's going to destroy the world.
So,
and so the pursuit of the MacGuffin is driving the story. And often the MacGuffin, like in Alien, the MacGuffin is the victim, although not necessarily the MacGuffin can be something quite separate from that. And so, like all of these elements in story design, coming up, creating a really fresh, unique, wonderful, truthful, fascinating MacGuffin, and generally speaking, it needs to be portable, because whoever has it has power. And so the hero can get the MacGuffin back, and then the villain takes it back again. And I mean, they can exchange this. They can lose it. They go searching for it. Then it drops into the ocean, and the hero and villain go to, under whatever. And so it's got to be a thing that's portable. But it can be just an idea, but it's got to be an idea that's written down. It's on a piece of paper or whatever,
or someone has it, or someone knows the information.
Something that you can move that helps generate the sequences of the action.
So something like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's obviously the Ark of the Covenant. In Pulp Fiction, it's the suitcase with the mysterious light that nobody.
And what's in that suitcase? And you open it up.
He still won't, and Quentin still won't say it.
Tarantino doesn't bother to tell you.
He does not. He's not gonna. And every time I ask him, he's like, "I don't know. What do you think it is?" Like it doesn't matter.
It's just that
doesn't matter.
It's a thing that everybody wants. It gives you power, and So
they said
you don't actually need to know more than that.
No, that's funny because one of the conspiracy theories about what's in the suitcase is that it's Ving Rhames' character Marcellus' soul. Literally, it's his soul that they're carrying around in there. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. His soul, and that the little band-aid on his back of the neck is where the soul got away. These are things that you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting.
Really?
Isn't that a fun? Isn't that?
It's wonderful. People care that much that they worry about that. And if it's a soul, how did it get out of the body? Oh, that's what the bandage is. I mean,
fantastic. I mean, you're talking about film geeks thinking about that movie for decades, trying to figure out what that is.
Right.
Now, you also talk about action set pieces. Can you talk a little bit about what a good action set piece is?
There are sequences in action. I mean, how many different ways physically can a hero pursue a villain in effort to rescue the victim, right? And so there's a limit. You can go towards something, right, and invade. That's a tactic. That's an action sequence. Or you can be caught and escape. You can rescue the victim, or not. Right, or lose the whatever, and so there are certain actions: moving toward, moving away, moving around, moving through, in a labyrinth, across a desert, and so forth. There are a certain limited number of ways in time and space that hero and villain can interact. And so I go through them in the book, give lots of examples of them. And I make the point that the writer has to understand it's limited. Time and space, has certain limitations. You can go toward, you can go away, you can chase someone or be chased. And so once you you've studied the genre, as I have, and you see the possibilities of it, and you see the way it's been executed brilliantly by storytellers in the past, those are the colors on your palette. And so instead of sitting there just wondering, well, what could my hero do, and just hitting a wall, if you study it, you see the tactics involved, and you see, well, I have choices. Moving toward, moving away, moving through, chasing, being chased, etc. There are, rescuing, escaping. There are choices. And so you let those choices play in your imagination, something clicks. I know, at this point in the story, he would, she would. And it comes to life. And so one of the purposes of writing a book like Action is to
someone's at the front door.
Is to somebody's at my front door. Is to open up the possibilities for the reader. So here's the genre, here's what has been done for thousands of years, and there are limits. And so you can go within those limits as you must, but that's not a straitjacket, it's just possibilities. And every one of those possible tactics can be done in a whole new way, to a different environment, for a different reason, with different characters, and I don't know. But you have to understand what the elements of the genre that are essential.
Now, I'd love to break in your book. You break down a bunch of action movies inside of your book. I'd love to just break down a couple of them, even slightly. Something like The Dark Knight. So something like The Dark Knight, which is arguably one of the best quote unquote superhero films in the genre ever made. Honestly, it's up there without question. And I always, someone like my wife who doesn't like superhero movies, she puts up with them because of me. But but when you watch something like The Dark Knight, I was watching, and I'm like, oh, if you just take Batman and the Joker out of this is just like Heat. It's just a crime. It's a fantastic crime thriller. Like you take so. A lot of times in superhero movies, you can't do that. You take the super out of it, it's over. But Dark Knight is just, it really felt like Michael Mann wrote it and directed it in many ways because it was so visceral. So can you break down The Dark Knight a little bit?
Well, what makes a film like The Dark Knight so wonderful, and this is true then of the whole action genre, is the nature of the villain.
Oh. So good.
The villain is the key to action. If you have no villain, there's nothing for the hero to do. If the villain is an idiot, there's nothing for the hero to do. He will trip over himself, right? Without your help, right? And so the more brilliantly realized the villain is, that forces the hero to rise to the occasion. The hero can only be as fascinating and compelling as the villain makes him, makes her. And so Dark Knight and the Joker is a fantastic villain. And his villainy is so profound that at the end, he creates a dilemma. the villain creates a dilemma that the hero will have to solve. And I don't want to spoil it for people, but it's one of the great crises in action stories. And because this villain, and absolutely ruthless is a weak word, actually. He is so sadistic,
maniacal
and sadistic. He likes causing pain in other people. And so he creates this great dilemma at the end where human beings will have to make a choice to live or die. And that's beyond the hero's control.
And it's also, the movie seems to me to be a story about two men's view on the world.
Yeah, well, they have points. They have.
I mean,
yes.
Joker thinks everything's in chaos, and we're just a second away from completely falling into complete anarchy.
And he enjoys that.
He enjoys that. But
yeah.
Batman doesn't believe that. Believes like, no, people are good. They're going to make the right choice.
Yeah, well, and so then the Joker creates this dilemma to prove his point.
Right, and that's it's a brilliant film, which also brings me to another problem with. There's a specific superhero who I've yet to see a fascinating film made of, but it's the most famous superhero of all time because it's the first superhero, Superman. Superman's a character, and I'm bringing this up because I think it's a really good illustration. Batman and Superman have always been on both sides. One's light, one's dark, one's much more. Batman's a much more interesting character, to say the least. By far. But there hasn't been a really great. And I'll get a lot of hate mail for this fantastic like Superman film. Maybe obviously the Christopher Reeve film was excellent. I think Superman 2 was excellent in the 70s. But in recent years, when they try to redo Superman,
recently, okay, because I think Superman 1
is brilliant,
which Mario Puzo wrote the screenplay.
No, is brilliant.
He put Superman into dilemmas.
Now, why hasn't anyone else been able to?
Very satisfying.
So why hasn't anybody else been able to do that? Because in Superman 1, he was fighting a villain who was superior intellectually, but not physically. No, and then in Superman 2, he fought someone who was superior, quote unquote, superior mentally and physically, which was a General Zod, quote unquote, and also much more physical. They had three of them fighting.
So there was 3 against 1, right?
Right. So there was really stakes there. And then they took his powers away, and then he had to try to find them back. It was such a well done. Those are the two best Superman films, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Besides the Richard Pryor one. The third one, which was interesting to say the least. But what was it about the first one that made that Superman interesting?
Well, he had a moral imperative that he owed to his father, who had told him that he must not use his superpowers on Earth. He must not interfere in human destiny. He's godlike in his powers, as he demonstrates by reversing the spin of the Earth and turning back time.
Fantastic, by the way.
I know. And he mustn't use those powers. He must give. It's like, you see, like often, religious people are challenged by the question, why does God allow evil? And the answer traditionally has been free will. God wants human beings to have free will so that they can choose between good and evil. and that's the rationale. And so Mario Puzo called upon that same idea in Superman 1. Superman is godlike. He has that power. And why would he, allow evil? And his father tells him, you have to allow evil. You must not interfere with human destiny, which means let human beings do what human beings will do. And we know that half of human beings are evil. There's an evil side to human nature. And if you let human beings do what human beings do, there'll be a lot of evil in the world. And so Superman has to make that great moral choice to keep his father's sacred commandment or rescue the woman that he loves. And he chooses love. And breaks his father's holy commandment. And so it has, it has the idea in Superman 1 is rooted profoundly in Christianity.
Oh God, yes. No pun intended.
And Superman is a metaphor for Jesus Christ. Right? And on it goes. And so these things really connect to people because it's about something. It's about moral choice. And that's why, it was a great one. Now, the difference between Superman then and Batman is in Superman, if there's evil, it's really not dark. Okay, it's just kind of pastel evil.
Yeah, Lex Luthor is not maniacal.
No, but he's funny, and and he's he's very funny. Otisville, I mean, he's very funny.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
Otisville. So, but the Joker is a different thing. Joker's not Lex Luthor. Joker really is evil, and he's sadistic. He enjoys causing people to suffer. He lives for it. Because the Joker in Batman is so dark, Batman has the potential then to create stories that are really compelling and rich. Because Superman operates in a world where evil never gets to that kind of darkness, it's more about the adventure and the spectacle of it. And so that's why you might feel that the Superman movies are less impactful than the Batman, because Batman's taking that whole genre, that character is drawing on a much darker source of villainy.
That makes
and it's not as nice. It's just not nice. Batman's really some of those Batman films. I mean,
the latest one.
The way these are innocent victims. The citizens of Gotham are horrible people.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, it's a question whether or not to save them. Who cares? Let them destroy themselves. So it brings up moral questions. I mean, that's the essence of it. Batman brings up moral questions that are more profound, darker, deeper than the moral questions in Superman.
And then something like what Marvel has done with the cast of characters they have, because Marvel's doesn't have really doesn't have darkness. It's as dark as the Joker. It's very pastel, like you say. But one of the things and people always ask, like, why do you think that they're so successful over these years? I'm like, yeah, and we've talked about some of the reasons, but they've done something that no other film studio has ever done, which is carry characters over a decade. I mean, by the time we get to the Avengers Endgame and Iron Man, we've been with Iron Man for 10 years and seen him in multiple films. And we have such an emotional connection. So, what happens in that movie is so impactful because of that. And that's not done in cinema, hasn't been done in cinema ever. I don't think anyone's been able to do that at that scale by any stretch of the imagination.
No, there's a secret sauce there that is kind of wonderful. I mean, they got you when you were kids, when you fell in love with those
Oh,
characters, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And so that, that they are evolving, they are revealing, uh, and that those are the two elements. How do you create a series? What keeps a series alive? Every day now, writers are facing that problem in long form television.
Mm-hmm.
What will bring people back? Episode after episode, season after season, even for years, And the two things, it seems to me, that bring people back are revelation,
Mm-hmm.
number one. You think you know these characters, you think you understand their dimensions and their strengths, their weaknesses, their power, whatever their natures. You think you understand them, but you really don't. And in the future, there will be episodes in which there'll be a revelation of who that character really is that will make perfect sense, but you didn't see prior. So those revelations about the depth and complexities of characters that you thought you knew, that now you realize they didn't really know altogether, that fascinates. And so revelation and change. You know who these key characters are at the beginning of the series, and then you watch them undergo over time change, becoming better morally, worse morally, more willful, more weak, more whatever. They're changing, usually depends, but generally for the better. And so revelation of qualities and characters you didn't see before, and change in the nature of characters that you didn't see coming. Those two things keep the series alive. And Marvel's got that down, and they know how to parse out revelations of character. They have a vision that's years and years into the future about where will these characters go. So as long as there's revelations and change, they can do it over and over and over because it adds to the audience's understanding of the characters, and that is a pleasure.
Right. So it's just, again, so a character like, I don't know how much you know about these characters, but a character like Thor at the beginning was very different to the Thor that we see now. And he's become one of the most popular, where at the beginning he was one of the least popular characters. And
they've arced him, and
big time.
And now, if you talk to the writers and they say we had no idea where Thor would go, okay, I mean, I've heard that a lot. And my answer to that is, well, consciously you didn't. All right, but subconsciously you knew that character had potential.
Yep.
And you improvised and you experimented, and it turned out that there were aspects, and that's just coming out of your talent, your creativity, and what fascinates revelation and change, and so you're revealing and changing this character, and the results are wonderful.
And to be fair, I mean, they had 50 or 60 years of writing, or 70 years of writing, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of stories with these characters, arcing them, moving them across time over decades. I mean, Spider-Man is, how many times have we seen a Spider-Man story? But the latest one blew the box office out of the water. Well, because of nostalgia too. There was a little bit of nostalgia thrown in there with the old Spider-Mans coming back, but that was something new. We hadn't seen that before. We haven't.
There you go. And there's a whole generation of the audience who didn't see it. They weren't born when that was it.
My daughters were like, "Is that the original Spider-Man?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Can we watch those movies? Okay, let's go back and watch those movies."
Really?
So, yeah, because they were like, "Who's that Spider-Man?" they only know the one Spider-Man. And they're like,
Right.
is that another Spider-Man? I'm like, yeah, there's 2 movies of him. He did 3 movies and he's the one that started it all. And I was like, really? And like, yeah. So so this is, and also when you build something like what Marvel has, they've built an ecosystem, a world of these characters in these movies. And same thing for Batman and those kind of characters. There's a bunch of them. And when you run into like James Bond, more, an older reference of James Bond, when you watch one Daniel Craig, you're going to want to watch all the Daniel Craigs. But then you watch Pierce Brosnan, you're like, oh, that's not like Daniel Craig. But maybe you like Pierce Brosnan, or you watch Connery or Moore, or one of these fun things. So it's fascinating. Robert, I could talk to you for hours about this.
Yeah, that's great fun. Because we love, it's always fun to talk about things you love.
Now tell me where we could, when the book comes out and where we can get it.
Book, Amazon.com, the usual suspects, Barnes and Nobles, whatever, but at Amazon certainly. And it comes out on the 6th. Today is the 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 4 days, that it'll be out. And the pre-orders have been spectacular. I hope I hope that it does. What I wanted to do is to take action as a genre to yet another level. I want to get really creative, talented people to love the genre, not to look down their nose, not to sneer, but to love it and embrace it and see it as a modern metaphor for the life and death struggle for human beings now and in the future. And that, we've been telling action stories since Homer, and it's not going to go away. Life and death is the core value of action. And that is a struggle that is eternal, obviously. So it comes out on the 6th, and I hope that not only the people who love action today, but of course all those people who could consider it will read it, and what they're going to discover is it's a hell of a lot more complicated and more difficult than you thought.
Yeah, it's not just a bunch of explosions and guns.
I will make it very clear that this is far more complex, much more sophisticated, and much more difficult than you thought. But if you put your imagination to it, you can do something we've never seen before. So, I hope they'll. I hope all writers will give it a chance, read it, see if there's something in that attracts them, and I hope that in the decades to come, that the book will help elevate the action genre to something continuously progressing and growing and capturing our imagination.
Now, Robert, there's one question I always ask my guests, and I don't remember if I asked you this first time, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And please, it's a very, very difficult question. I'm not sure you're going to be able to answer it, but I'm going to give you a shot at it. 3 of your favorite films of all time.
At the bear trap in that question is giving yourself away, and just how pretentious are you?
Right. How many Bergman films are going to be on that list?
Well, a number of them. But I'll tell you, number one, if it was 2:00 in the morning and I was traveling to, Auckland, New Zealand, full of jet lag, unable to sleep, what would I hope was on television? Well, my first hope would probably be Chinatown.
Oh, so good. So good.
And if not Chinatown, then maybe Groundhog Day.
Oh, so good.
And if not Groundhog Day, the number three, please God, please give me Godfather 1, 2, and 3. Okay.
All three of them back to back.
Yeah, that would make a nice. Eventually I'd get to sleep. So, yeah, those would be three of my first choices. They're a wonderful film, and they're very satisfying. And that the reason I picked those three is because I've realized over the years, that when you are in that situation and you're skimming the channels, looking for something to watch, to kill time. Okay. I have seen the last half of Chinatown, the last half of Groundhog Day, and the last halves of Godfathers 1 and 2 so many times because it's in the middle and you go, oh shit, it's Godfather. Oh, it's Chinatown. And you just stop.
Right, exactly. And you know what's funny on that list? You put Groundhog's Day, which I consider one of the greatest comedies ever written, and it doesn't get the kind of attention and analysis that it should, because people write it off because it was a comedy, which I love. Oh, it's not serious.
Yeah, that's snobbery.
It's not exactly, but it is so brilliant, so brilliantly written, and I mean, obviously the direction and the Bill Murray and Andy McDowell. I mean, it's masterful. But was there a film prior to Groundhog's Day that used that idea of repeating time, like they're caught in a loop? Because there's been, again, the cliche is now there are multiple films like that, but I don't remember anything like Groundhog's Day before Groundhog's Day.
I can't either. There probably was, but I can't remember. I know that there are certainly time travel stories.
Sure.
People go back in time, forward in time, sideways in time. I don't know. But living the same day over and over and over again.
Until you change as a human being? Never seen that.
I think that if we Googled, it seems to me there's a little echo in my memory here saying back in the 1930s, there was a play, and not a film, but a play, where somebody was living the same day over and over. And that play was probably considered avant-garde.
I'm actually looking at it right now. Mirror of a Hero in 1987. Run Lola Run, but that's not the same.
No, that's
Edge of Tomorrow, but that was way after. No. All the other ones have been after. I haven't seen anything. The only one that was Mirror for Hero in 1987, which was like 6 years earlier. But other than that, not really. And well, obviously nothing as good as
no, and Run Lola Run's not about living the same day 3 times over.
Right.
It's living the same day 3 different ways.
Right. And that's Rashomon.
And that's Rashomon. But that's not the same day over and over. That's points of view.
Exactly.
So there have been stories where time. I mean, when the great was, of course, Pirandello's play from the 1920s, 6 characters in search of an author.
Mm-hmm.
So these characters come to life, and they need actors to act out their lives to free them so that they can go to the next life, next world, whatever it is. So the notion of multiple realities and reliving things, that's not new. But Groundhog Day, if it is an original, it's the best that anybody's ever done with that.
It is the Die Hard of repeating day movies.
Yes. And what I love about it is I think another great favorite of mine, for example, would be The Verdict.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic.
And the reason I like The Verdict, same reason I like Groundhog Day, it's the redemption plot.
Mm-hmm.
The bad guy turns good story. We all hold out in our heart of hearts, can I become a better human being?
Mm-hmm.
Or will I just make the same mistake over and over and over, mistreat myself and other people the same old way over and over? Can I redeem myself?
Mm-hmm.
And in stories like that, like Groundhog Day, Verdict, redeem the character in a beautiful way. And so the idea of redemption is very powerful.
Robert, like I said, I can talk for hours about movies and about story. My friend, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you
You're
for all
welcome, Alex. Thank you.
and thank you so much for all the hard work you've been doing for these decades, trying to educate storytellers and help them along their
It's
path.
not been hard work. It's been pleasure.
Thank you, my friend.
Seriously, I do what I love. And you know, as I said, I'm writing story 2. I'm gonna do what I love in a whole new way again. It's no. So I hope people will check out Action,
Mm-hmm.
give it a look, and let's try to take this genre to to a higher, more beautiful level.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Alex. Take care now.